Hey guys, this is Dr. Cameron Dennis, physical therapist, back on track therapy and wellness, and the creator of the Knee Pain Solution. And this is assessing your training schedule, module 2, lesson 5. So let's get into it. So something that's very important. Your training schedule can be a huge contributor to injury. And I would say this is probably one of the biggest contributors to injury in runners. So it's very important that we get to the bottom of what's the most important aspects of a healthy training schedule. So indicators of overuse or a poor training schedule or problems with your training schedule would be if you're frequently injured or chronically fatigued, sore, or sick. So these are all indicators of overtraining. Okay. So individual differences. Not everybody's the same, like we've talked about. An ideal training program depends on a lot of factors. There's no one ideal training program for everyone. It's something that you need to figure out either on your own or with some help from someone with more experience in running and creating these programs. So some factors that you might want to think about if you're doing it on your own would be your history of running. So whether you're someone who's run for 20 years or just 20 minutes. If you're someone who's run a lot longer, obviously, then you probably don't need to be as careful when you're as slow as someone who's just starting running and who's never run before, as your body's a little more used to it. Excuse me. And is more likely to tolerate the loads from running. So your medical history, this is definitely important. If you have a history of injuries, if you have heart conditions, other medical complications, anything that might make you different from someone who's completely healthy, those are all things you need to take into consideration. So your current level of conditioning is sort of related to your history of running. However, this is more specific to your to how you're doing at this very minute. So obviously, if you're someone who runs every day, or you're someone who runs 3 or 4 times a week, and you've been doing that for a year, your current level of conditioning is probably pretty good. So any training program from that point on will be basically taking off from that point, from where you are right now, as opposed to someone who's just starting. Your amount of free time. So some folks have tons of free time. They have, a job where they only have to work 1 or 2 days a week. I don't think many of us are fortunate enough for that, but their training program is likely to be different from someone who works 7 days a week. So that's something to take into consideration. The other thing that's pretty important is your goals. So is your goal just to be a casual runner? Or is your goal to be an ultra marathoner? Those, obviously, your training programs will be completely different in those situations. So when creating a training program, there are 5 rules that I want to talk about. So I actually made these up. There are probably more rules coming down the road, but these are what I thought were pretty important, or maybe the most important things at the time of writing this, at least in my mind. So if you follow these 5 rules, there's a good chance that you will reduce your risk of injury. There's no way to completely eliminate risk of injury, no matter what you do, as things can happen, and nobody's perfect. So, but we can reduce our risk, right? We can make ourselves smarter in the way that we train. So rule number 1, 3 to 4 days of running is more than adequate for most casual runners. So this is something that I think a lot of runners get wrong. They feel that they need to run 6 to 7 days a week to stay in shape, but that's just not the case. For a lot of people who run 6 to 7 days a week, they're not resting adequately. they go out and run 3 to 4 miles, for example. Each time they go out and run, and you're probably not getting the benefits that you think if you're someone who does that, because you need to add a little bit of variety into your running. And B, you're stressing the same structures time and time again and not allowing for proper rest. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, place low intensity running days or rest days in between long runs, track days, or races to allow for your body to recover from the previous few days of workout. So I put an example down here. You can see Monday through Sunday, so 7 days of the week. And for example, on Monday, you'll notice that the person ran at a high intensity level. So maybe they did a track day, or they did a long run. Let's say they did a long run. The next day, they could either do a low intensity day or a rest day. Now, when I say rest, it doesn't have to be complete rest. You can do, if you're someone who really has to be active, then it's okay for you to do what's called active rest. And that's more of like a cross-training type of deal. So you can, go play basketball, go play tennis, do swimming, biking, whatever it is, but it's okay to take a day to do something other than running. And it's actually very important that you do so. You'll notice on Wednesday, they go back up to a moderate intensity. And then, so this is just an example. It's not perfect, but then the next day they rest. Okay. You'll notice I have 2 rest days in here. That could be, you could alternate those between Thursday and Friday, or however your work schedule allows. But Friday is a moderate intensity run. Saturday, for example, maybe they ran a race. Sunday, they did a little bit of walking and jogging, something low intensity to allow themselves to recover before their next run on Monday, their high intensity run on Monday. So rule number 3, every 3 to 4 months, you should consider taking 1 week off from running completely. So you may add cross training such as swimming or cycling during this week to maintain cardiovascular fitness. But it's important that you allow the structures that you're constantly stressing to recover. Now, this is something that I recommend for weightlifters as well. It isn't just runners, but typically running is a little bit different because it has so much repetitive motion. It's important that we allow ourselves to recover, especially if you're someone who's doing that 6 to 7 days a week. This is even more important for you. So even professional runners have an off season. They're not necessarily going year round at full intensity like a lot of casual runners do. So that's actually why a lot of casual runners end up injured more than the elite runners. So rule number 4, avoid increasing mileage more than 10% per week. I have this example down below here. This is week number 1 here, week 2, week 3, week 4. You'll notice that this is someone who's never, maybe they haven't run before. So over the whole week, week number 1, they did 8 miles. Week number 2, they moved up to 12. Now you'll notice that this is not 10%. So 10% of 8 would be 0.8. That means they would only go up to a 9 if they were following rule number 4. But that's not how it works when you're in single digits or around single digits. So you'll notice what I wrote here. This does not apply when mileage is in single digits. Slow progression should be considered, especially in these early stages. But when you're in that low mileage range, it's hard to increase your mileage at only 10%. It would take you a year to get anywhere. So it's okay to go up a little bit, but you still want to gradually increase. So in this example, I noticed, or I made him go up about 50%, and that's okay. So once he gets up to that around 12 to 15 miles, you'll notice I start to kind of slow it down a little bit. So he went from week 1 to week 2, he jumped up 4 miles. Week 2 to week 3, he jumped up 2 and 2 again. So this is just an example. It's not perfect. Everyone's different. You just have to listen to your body. So progressing mileage too quickly can lead to inadequate tissue healing and increased risk of pain or injury. So slow and steady wins the race. Rule number 5, take stock of your current emotional state, stress level, fatigue level, and nutrition for that day prior to running each day. So if any of those areas you feel are lacking after taking an assessment, a self-assessment before each run, consider lowering the intensity of the day's workout, because truly it's not worth hurting yourself over, right? It's important that you take a look at these areas. I think more important than people realize. So don't underestimate the importance of these areas. So that's it for the simple rules for progressing your running. So please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next lesson.